If you care about the future of this country, this episode of Equal Matters is for you. It's about how healthcare spending could harm the very future of America. Cal, the guitar hero, with that intro. Catch his infectious energy and his stories about the nationwide tour he went on a couple episodes back. My name is Rob Hunter. I've worked in media since I left college in 2000, specifically talk radio. Talk radio has provided an opportunity to present interesting ideas and interesting topics, but some of those issues have become too difficult to talk about because they're too truthful and they're difficult problems to solve. But that does not make these issues, these challenges, any less true. Talk radio, like cable news, is mostly about politics, and many Americans, myself included, now believe that politics is just not working. Politics isn't working because it's become fantasy land in a way, where you can believe the greatest challenges our country faces are no big deal, or someone else's problem, or someone else will solve them. But the reality is a thriving, growing country is beneficial for all of us. We can only thrive and grow if we're honest with ourselves. So today, Congressman David Schweikert is back on Equal Matters, talking about one of our country's biggest challenges, healthcare spending. The government, which essentially means your money, covers 70% of all healthcare spending. That is trillions of taxpayer dollars. Get this, 5% of the United States population is 50% of all healthcare spending. If nothing changes, the amount of money spent in healthcare will have long-term consequences for our country's finances. For example, the average Medicare recipient gets back 3 times as much as they put in. Now, this isn't to blame anyone. It's just the math. And as Congressman Schweikert likes to say, the math always wins. The good news is that there is hope. There are some great ideas out there. There are great solutions out there. Innovation in healthcare. Things that are on the cusp of changing healthcare forever. Those innovations could significantly reduce the cost of healthcare. But, and this is a big but, you'll learn today that some of this innovation is currently illegal, protected by powerful, rich lobbies and lobbyists. The first step to change starts with knowledge. Important knowledge. Knowledge that you can share. You can tell your friends what you heard today on Equal Matters, or better yet, share this episode of Equal Matters with them, with Congressman David Schweikert. He joins us now. Congressman David Schweikert, let's talk about health care. Is the cost of health care the biggest financial challenge we face in this country?
Yeah, by far it's the biggest. All right, let's get this very seriously. Health care is the single biggest driver of U.S. sovereign debt. And if you look at from today through the next 30 years, it's 100% when you consider the financing cost of that shortfall, particularly in Medicare. And if we choose to backfill Social Security, because remember, Social Security is out of money in about now 8.5, 9 years, people take about a 25% cut. And that's just the trust fund is gone. But healthcare, and it's much worse today than even 6 months ago, as we're doing the math, because healthcare inflation is running substantially faster than everything else. We have
regular old inflation.
Yeah, so we have markets where the healthcare inflation is 3 times what that market area's
you're talking like 18%?
CPI. Yeah, 16s to 18s. And that's actually, if you take a look over the next month or two, if you're a sick enough person to be watching U.S. debt.
You are.
And we get some new updates very shortly here. Interest costs spiked up heavily, and then the costs within Medicare.
So we're getting a double whammy there.
Well, they feed off of each other.
Okay. So the government, taxpayers, we pay for approximately 70% of healthcare spending in the U.S., and it's around $4 trillion total. Is that an accurate number?
Yeah, I think it actually may be slightly more.
I thought you were going to know. It's only 50%.
No, because within that, it's more than 4, because if it's 20% of GDP sitting at 25 trillion. So, but within that, you got to understand, if you think about every level of government and all the way it touches, so, we immediately think of Medicare and Medicaid, but Medicare, Medicaid, Indian Health Services, veterans benefits, government employees, government retirees, uncompensated care.
What is that?
That's where you may have hospitals that say we have a disproportionate share of our population is uninsured. Could be people here illegally, people who are just walking uninsured, and so it's uncompensated care. And theoretically, for many of these medical facilities, hospitals, those things, that's part of what they're supposed to do as part of their charitable commitment to the community for being tax exempt. But then even the federal government sends to states a certain amount of money, what we call disproportionate share calculations. So I don't mean to geek out on that stuff, because the argument I'm going to make you is a very simple one. Stop thinking about healthcare as how we finance it. Almost every debate I have in Congress or in my community or town hall is Obamacare is good, or nationalized healthcare, or Medicare for all is good, or it's horrible. Please remember, those are financing bills. Obamacare, the ACA, was who got subsidized and who had to pay. Medicare for all is everyone gets subsidized and everyone pays. It just, the channel is through government, but it's a financing bill. The Republican alternative was who got to pay and who got subsidized, but it was still a financing bill. I get many of my brothers and sisters on more so the right. We talk about price transparency. Wonderful thing.
That's when you call your doctor and say a procedure is.
Or you go online and the hospital and all their pricing is online. I think it should happen, except the best academic studies. There's two big academic studies that say in a third-party payer system, it may only move the price about 1%.
Wow.
Because if you're not paying, your insurance, do you care if it's $1 or $10,000? I'm not paying. If you have a third-party insurance system, then there's some of the very smart people in the Cato Institutes and those, and say, well, if you made it first dollar, where insurance pays you and you pay for your health care, you'd have a very different pricing system. Absolutely. But the public isn't going to take that. And could you imagine the election cycle where you tried to pass that? And even then, if it's still a third party handing you the check. So the argument for those of us who have to figure out how to finance this is, how do we change the argument from a debate over how to finance healthcare to what we actually pay?
So that would be what we're paying for, procedures,
everything. And so we're going to do this from top to bottom. First off, where does the money go? 5% of the U.S. population is over 50% of all healthcare spending.
So 5%, that's, we'll call it $2 trillion, give or take. More than that.
Yeah, remember, if we say healthcare is close to 20% of the economy.
25
and,
trillion.
Yeah, okay.
So let's call it $3 trillion, 5% of people, give or take.
All right. So 5% of the population, these are individuals who are really suffering. They're typically people with multiple chronic conditions. Obesity is the most common indicator within that population. Diabetes, other things. And then they have a cascade of other illnesses. And they consume, let's just use it to make math simple, half of all healthcare dollars. So it's a simple, obvious. If you could actually remove some of those chronic conditions within that 5%, you have incredible impact. The other thing is there's a couple frauds in the debate. People will say, well, the most expensive time of healthcare is in your last, 6 weeks of life. That's absolutely true for the individual. Your most expensive, part of the healthcare you're going to spend will be in your last month or so of life. But that isn't for the society. That's for the individual, and they play games with that. Well, no. But I need to work through this.
Okay.
You as individuals, that into life care is really expensive. But if you look at once again, the aggregate of all healthcare spend, it's that 5% with multiple chronic conditions. So our theory and some of the economists that we work around that are trying to look at the world differently is we're idiots. We keep getting people who say, if we just improved electronic healthcare records, if we just gave everyone a vitamin in the morning or a supplement or this and that, it's incrementalism isn't going to save us. The wheels are about to come. Matter of fact, they're coming off right now. There's a very good chance that this year, which was supposed to be, if you went back 2 years ago, the budget modeling for this year was we're going to borrow like $900 billion. In the last 12 months, we've borrowed $2.1 trillion.
So we more than doubled it.
More than doubled
really
it. Now, the best estimate, because there's some spike in tax receipts that come in near the end of the year, we might be around 1.8. That's what my economists think. I'm actually over 1.9 and so we actually have sort of a betting pool in our office. We don't actually bet money. We bet I end up buying lunch, which either way, I still end up buying lunch for everyone. I think I'm getting screwed in this deal. But where I'm going with this is thinking differently. Instead of trying to come up with another financing scheme, as Americans, how have we disrupted prices in everything else, in technology, in the things around us? And so let's go from the easiest conceptually to some things they're harder, but actually will have much more impact. So if I came to you tomorrow and said, there's this thing you could have in your home medicine cabinet, and you blow into it, and it almost instantly would say, Rob, you have the flu. Rob, I'm bouncing off your telephone because that's where your medical records are. You're not allergic to any of these antivirals. We're ordering an antiviral. Lyft is going to come drop it off at your house in 2 hours. No humans involved in that. Completely autonomous. Would that make your life easier?
100%. Rather than scheduling a doctor's appointment, getting in there, wasting an hour of my life before the doctor comes in, then going to the CVS or the Walgreens on my own.
Yep. So that technology,
while I'm sick, spreading the sickness around.
Yeah, and that technology exists.
It does.
It's actually existed for years. But the Social Security Act of the United States says you will see a doctor. CMS doesn't really have an interest in financing.
CMS is what again?
Think of it as the payments portion of Health and Human Services. So that's more if you're on Medicare, Medicaid. State licensing doesn't really like this. The pharmacy board, the doctor's board, the licensing
people that own the buildings urgent cares are in.
Yeah, well, that they're more the political problem, even just the licensing problem. But yet, for anyone that's listening to this, you go, well, you can't have autonomous health care. That would be, it doesn't actually exist. Do you know anyone with diabetes?
Yes.
Who has a pump?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, they've had functionally autonomous health care for a decade. There's a little thing reading their blood glucose, talking to the phone, which is talking to the algorithm, which is talking back to the phone, which is then talking to the pump. And it's dosing them. And it's done by how many millions of people every single day. Autonomous healthcare with prescribing already exists. Anyone with that little thing attached to them, it's already happening. So every time I give that example, people look at me and go, oh, I hadn't thought of that. So where I'm going with this is we're told in not this one, but the next one, Apple Watch will have blood glucose in it. And I'm just going to use the Apple Watch just as an example, but some of this technology already exists. I think Garmin actually may already have one out in the market, or Samsung, one or the other, actually has a wearable that does everything from blood pressure to temperature to heart rate to now blood glucose. And apparently with those data points, you can have amazingly accurate 24-hour a day, 7-day a week. You are crowdsourcing your own body for healthcare. Mm-hmm. And there's a statistical argument out there that says, what's more valuable, the medical records that are sitting in that paper file at your doctor's office or the data off your body from the last 96 hours?
The latter, obviously.
Yeah, it turns out the data coming off your body tells us dramatically more. There's even an experiment of one, which actually I guess is going to try to go get certified, that actually can almost read your body's calorie count as you're eating.
Wow.
because calorie, remember, is an energy unit. Your body's burning it and can read it. So that's the thing. That's an example of you have a supercomputer on your wrist or in your hand today. It's called that smartphone. Mm-hmm. The technology in that would have cost how much 10, 15 years ago? For its computing capacity, storage capacity. So what happens if these things that we already walk around with, we're already willing to wear, and if you're willing to add a couple more things, you could actually change access to healthcare because it's with you. You are the generator of the data. And for anyone who goes, what about privacy? Look, you put your financial life on your phone. If you use Apple Pay or something like that, your bank accounts are attached to it. The ability to encrypt is easy. And you think your life is safer, more secure because your medical records are sitting in some paper file with a minimum wage receptionist who's faxing it to the other doctor's office? I mean, it's just people, we've gotten so caught up in the rhetoric. And I have a couple of my friends that say, but I give speeches about the doctor-patient relationship. Yeah, but I hate it when someone with cold hands touches me.
Right. Well, my relationship with my doctor is basically non-existent. At 15 minutes a year, I see him.
Yeah.
It's not like a real relationship. And he told me most of what we do is guesswork.
Oh, well, at least you have a very honest medical practitioner.
Most honest I've ever heard a doctor.
So that's just one of the modules we're trying to legalize. Remember, I spent years working on telehealth, and the number of people said, telehealth will never work. Grandma will never use it. And then the pandemic hit, and turns out Grandma knew how to work her phone.
Wow. Forced change right there.
It's amazing. Mm-hmm. It's just amazing.
So how do you do that? How do you make these devices legal? Do you have to lobby people in Congress?
It turns out, in many ways, it's the ecosystem's all screwed up. You get these professors that walk into your office, and where this partially came from is several years ago. Now, God, it's amazing. Several years ago, a material science professor comes to my office. She goes, "I've been working on this thing," because we saw an article, invited her to come talk to us, and it was that breath biopsy. And later on, we found out others who were working on this were having incredible difficulty raising capital. They couldn't get the Wall Street types, the medical enthusiasts to invest in the technology because they didn't think they could get paid because it was illegal. Because now you could have it where you blow into it and you take the data and hand it to your doctor or your urgent care center, fine, but then you didn't remove any costs.
Right.
Remember, if we're talking about disrupting the cost of healthcare, moment of brutal honesty, got to remove the people.
As in the people, just the general, right? Because it's like the process. Well,
and I say that more as a placeholder because it's the building, it's the parking lot, it's the air conditioning, it's it's all those things, and there's a reason you no longer go to Blockbuster Video. You can hit a button at home and you have how many things streaming to you?
Too many.
And I bet you if you add up, you spend less money on all that streaming with tens of thousands of choices than you used to spend going and getting that CD at the local strip center from the Blockbuster Video. This type of technology disruption's always been around us, except healthcare, it's so much harder because of the laws, the licensing, and the money. So that's first the disruption on the technology side. And look, if you're a suburban mom, I have 2 little kids. Trying to find time in our lives if one of the kids is sick and then try to get it. So that concept is the technology may be amazing for productivity and other things in the society. And now if you really want to go to crazy town, I've done a number of very detailed floor speeches on this over the years. There's an Israeli company that almost has a medical lab in a box. Now, this was originally designed for small doctor's offices. So you could give a urine sample or saliva sample or even a couple drops of blood. It's almost what Theranos promised, but it actually exists today.
Oh.
And, yes. And that sort of concept. Now, their fantasy is, and they're actually working on it, because in some parts are already available to you and as a consumer. I mean, crazy thing, there's full color, what do you call it? It's ultrasound. Go on Amazon. Anyone it's skeptical of what I'm saying, just go on Amazon right now and put in handheld color ultrasound. And for like $2,000-$3,000, you can get a really good one that sits in your pocket. So to understand, and it was just a couple of years ago, I was helping a group raise charity money, and they wanted $50,000 for one. And now it's on Amazon. So this is not utopianism. This sort of exists. Now my job is to figure out how
there it is.
Yep. he's actually he didn't believe me. He's actually looking it up as we're talking.
$2,299 for one. Veterinary one for $1,085.
Yeah.
$1,785. There you go.
But so now you're scanning your knee, and it's allowed to go talk to the AI and the algorithm. And you're getting back data saying, hey, you have bone spurs. You probably should go get those removed. So this is just one of the elements of the adoption of technology in our everyday life to stay dramatically healthier. Now let's get on to the things that are much bigger dollars and much more uncomfortable. United States, we're seeing some data that 40% of our population is obese.
Mm-hmm.
We have some states where the morbid obesity numbers are just shocking. And COVID and the brilliance of lock everyone up and stay home turns out, may have a decade or two or three of misery that it created by people becoming much more sedentary, becoming obese, screwing up their relationships with the community and labor and everything else.
Neighbors.
Yeah. It turned out, and fertility rates collapsed, which is the one thing. Apparently, we all thought there'd be a baby boom, everyone's staying home. Turns out it didn't work that way. Apparently, your wife doesn't want you around that much. All right, but
no comment. No.
So this is the second leg on the stool, is we need to be brutally honest. And everyone who comes to me, David, you are fat shaming because you talked about obesity. Think about how cruel that is. We know the concentration of obesity is in some populations that are having, that have some real historic issues with income inequality, some difficulties. And then to not talk about one of the very things we think may be a prime driver of poverty in urban poor, rural poor, tribal populations. It just shows you how sick society is when you can't actually talk about the problem.
Right. Even if it's just database, you're not singling anyone out in particular.
It's just so there are these things they're called GLP-1s. You may think of them as Ozempic, some of these new drugs that were originally starting to be designed for diabetes, to help someone with type 2 sort of pull down their weight, the way they use sugar, suppression of appetites. And there's some sister drugs that are almost the same neural pathways that were more for obesity. Well, they're turning out to be remarkably effective with minimal side effects. You actually now, in the pop culture world, the pretty people you hear using them for their next Hollywood movie.
Get that 6-pack.
Yeah, well, I get my 12-pack at Costco. I don't know if that joke works, but...
Well, as a non-drinker, yeah, your 12-pack of whatever Costco sells in 12
when my
pack.
wife had me, I had amazing abs, and every once in a while she comes up and pats me and goes, would really like those back. I think that's just cruel.
That is cruel. I haven't had any since I was like 18 or 19, so I'm good.
But we're working on a data set right now with my joint economic economists, saying what would happen, just a pure thought experiment. What would happen if you and I went to Medicare, Medicaid, Indian Health Services, veterans, and said, for those folks who are BMIs over a certain level, we're going to give you the optionality of, we're going to work with you to get your weight down. Now, it's more than sticking a needle in your tummy or your thigh or the new one that's a pill to help you get your weight down. We're also going to have to work with you on what you eat, on your lifestyle, those things. But we're working on seeing some very interesting data that for urban poor, diabetes and obesity may be the leading cause of income inequality.
Really?
Yeah. And so for so many years, we always thought education, racism, things like that. But it turns out what happens when you have a family member who's gone blind from diabetes or lost a toe or had part of their feet cut off?
Take care of them, hang around.
And so it's that labor participation concepts of you can't really work in society. There's a whole category of jobs that, if you're not particularly well educated, jobs often are much more physical. If you can't do a physical job, so it's a very complex, and there's not a lot in the literature. So don't mean to geek out on that, but we're trying to get our heads around what is the moral argument for helping society very quickly get healthier and lose that weight. And I'll get people who will jeer at me, from an audience when I do my slideshow saying, well, just teach them to walk more or tell them, put them on a diet. Okay, sure. You tell me how you want to make that work, because I think we've been,
everybody knows those two basic things.
Well, one of the funniest and actually it's greatest data sets out there is in the last, I think it was decade, what was the greatest success in young people getting healthier? Remember Michelle Obama had this program of
Move or what it moved.
But she was given billions of dollars. Yep, didn't work at all. Pokemon Go.
Boom.
Pokemon Go.
A fun game.
Got young people wandering around all over our cities and sometimes in the middle of intersections, but chasing whatever those damn things were.
Pikachu.
But they gamified it. And you need to think that through. They gamified being healthy. Turns out it wasn't telling you what to eat, wasn't telling you the time to exercise, wasn't instructing. Americans don't really like being told what to do, but they gamified it.
We like playing games.
We like playing games, and they like getting little shiny things on whatever their phone.
Mm-hmm.
So you take that into the thought of saying, okay, what would happen if we could dramatically stabilize or reduce type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetic populations? If diabetes itself, and I'm not talking all the other horrible things that come with obesity, the kidney failures, the heart issues, all the other things, just diabetes. Diabetes itself is 33% of all healthcare spend. It's 31% of all Medicare spend. Could you cut it in half? You theoretically could.
Like with the technology that's here now.
With the technology that's here now. And you could do that by the end of the decade. So the end of the decade is almost dystopian in the amount of debt to GDP because we're getting old very fast as a society.
So dystopian in the sense there will be no economic growth, opportunity, productivity?
Yeah. The baseline number says we will be borrowing 7.5% of the entire economy of every year.
So again, use that 25 trillion number. That's a lot of dough.
Yeah, but it gets uglier. This is where I depress people if you can do math. So let's say you're at 7.5% of the entire economy every year is being borrowed, and that's almost all healthcare. It's benefits for seniors. I mean, these are promises we've made.
Yep.
And the economic growth is projected to be at 1.8.
Not sustainable.
Yeah, you are burning.
Because you're 6% behind the borrowing number. So if you were
going
at 15%.
And it's worse than that.
Bad.
Some of the outside economists, like Bloomberg a week or so ago, their two lead economists put out a paper saying they think it could be as high as 13% of GDP going to borrowing. What is it? Moody's Analytics actually has it 8, 9. So you start to see numbers like that, and almost all that is the financing costs of the debt. Because we're borrowing, remember, you're chasing your tail. You're borrowing so much money, it pushes up interest rates because you're consuming almost every available lending dime in the world.
Is it because it's more risky to let you borrow money?
No,
it's
just you're just consuming it.
Okay.
You mean how much savings is there in the world?
Probably not a lot.
And Americans are not great savers. Unlike Japan, where they're amazing savers. They can almost finance their national debt themselves because they save so much of their money. Americans don't. So we have to find, we basically consume much of the investment capital of whole portions of the world. But be that as it may. So where I'm going is an all-in, it's almost think as President Trump put together that, operation saying warp speed. They threw everything they had at it and they made it work. If you would do something like that, where this is all on, hands-on, because there's a punchline here coming, and say, we're going to take on diabetes in the United States. And we are going to use the blood glucose monitors to help people who are pre-diabetic start to realize what they're doing to their body, and could we help them? We're going to change parts of the farm bill. So nutrition support is a box of healthy food, not an EBT card to go buy onion rings. We're going to encourage through, and it may cost a little money, changing what we grow. We are incredibly efficient. We are so efficient. We distort what the entire world eats because we do it so cheap. But if you walk through a grocery store, how many things are, that's wheat, but they had to process it, or soy, because commodity value is so low, there's no profit. You have to add things. North America used to grow 3,300 types of grains. Today we function grow, 5?
Wow.
But darn, we're good at it. If you ever had what's happening in parts of Southern Europe right now, where Italy, Spain have a fungi that's killing off, several 100-year-old olive trees. I think their last count I saw, it's going to cost them about 10 billion euros this year, just the destruction of these trees. Wow. What would happen to the world if a fungi like that hit the U.S. soy crop? How much of the world starves?
You probably have a number. It seems uncalculable.
And I guess where I'm going with this is you also, so there's that fragility concept over here, that we have so many eggs in one basket. We're really good at it. But maybe an insurance policy is do more types of crops.
Diversify our portfolio, if you will.
And there's weird examples like this. I mean, how many people 30, 40 years ago were eating avocados and artichokes?
None.
We add, but we have things in our diet that have changed. You just kind of change that cycle time. And the other thing is, then with that, saying we understand the food, the monitoring of people's health, what we eat. Now we have these injections, the GLP-1s. There's now a tablet. And for anyone who's really interested, go do stem cell cure for diabetes. It's now in its second phase 1 trial, because the first one worked, a very small population, but required anti-rejection drugs. They figured out how to take stem cells. And why this is so important is there's two things that come with it. One, it may work for all sorts of other diseases. And two, you can do a biofoundry, meaning you don't have to have it customized to this person. You can build a factory where the line of cells work for everyone. And because if the body doesn't see it as foreign, it doesn't need to have come from your skin. And so it's a stem cell therapy for getting islet cells to start to repopulate in your body. And those are what produce insulin. It's focused obviously on type 1 diabetes, but the technology, and type 2 is complex. It's many, many different things. It's anti-rejection, immune. The body sets off immune responses, other things. But commonality is, we've seen some data that says if you can take parts of the type 2 population and get their weight down and get them somewhat healthy, for the majority of them, their bodies actually sort of start producing insulin again. There's going to be this 30, 40% out there that they may have done so much damage their bodies can't. And this will come back to make sense. So you could actually have this carrot and stick at the end of the decade if this technology comes through and you've been willing to do these things. Society is willing to work with you to get your body to produce insulin again, because 70% of healthcare is coming through government. 33% of all healthcare spending is diabetes. If we could cut it in half, it's the single biggest thing you can do to stabilize debt to GDP in the United States. So the legs of the stool are, a combination of technology, health, cures. And then if you really start to think the portfolio of cures, I mean, we just focus on a couple of the really expensive ones. Diabetes and Alzheimer's may be as much as 60% of all Medicare spend. Alzheimer's is much more complex, as we've had heartbreak after heartbreak. But you start to understand some of this may be, the half-court shot. Mm-hmm. But all the other theories of how we're going to deal with this are really ugly. There's slash and burn and cuts and...
well, they would have to be, I would imagine, major cuts if the direction we go on, we keep going on for 3 or 4 more years.
In some ways, it may not be major cuts because, you have a moral obligation. We made a deal with people saying, you work this many quarters, you're part of the society, you turn 65, you get these benefits. You turn 62 to 70, Social Security, you get these benefits. If you worked your 40 quarters or some combination in there before, here's the formula. And let's be honest, that's also where the votes are.
Yep.
So what happens in a world where I think it's now like 8 years, you could take every dime in discretionary spending, all defense, and all the rest of government and get rid of it. And in about 9 years, you don't have enough cash to even cover Medicare.
Wow.
People don't, they somehow, they live in this fantasy world. If you just got rid of foreign aid, if you just didn't pay members of Congress's salary, we may be overpaid, but but I think our entire salaries is like 18 seconds or 18 minutes of borrowing for an entire year. And you get these people and they really, really believe these things because they're angry. I did a town hall the other day and I showed all the healthcare costs and these things. And the hand went up saying, well, you should cut all these things, but you got to put more money in veterans. Okay, now we've raised veteran spending by 109% in like the last 8 years. But you start to realize, and when we did the math of what the audience wanted, there was no cuts.
So people don't like cuts, no matter what it is.
No, I mean,
can you, I don't know, is there some type of national security implication here? Because if you have a nation that's going to bankrupt itself.
There's some actually very smart economists who focus on international. Remember, China's also in real economic trouble, too.
I read that they have almost 300% borrowing, their debt compared to their economy.
You have to add in their housing market, but yes, it's 2-something. But high 200
like
plus.
296.
And remember, almost like 20% of their young people are unemployed.
Wow.
And if you ever see a demographic chart of China, it falls like nothing has ever been seen in the world history. It just, compared to the U.S., we're down here. There's this thing called a dependency ratio, how many workers you have compared to how many retirees. They're healthier than we are today. And they fall so hard. So the fact of the matter is, what happens when making your society healthier so they use dramatically less health care so you have some stabilization in your government spending also is a national security risk, our solution.
Yeah.
I hope this makes some sense.
No, it does, because well, here's another question, though. So if healthcare is already 20% of the economy, and you mentioned this the other day on Russell and Hunter, our afternoon show on 550 KFY, that even when it came to the debt limit deal that you guys struck with the Democrats, there's so much government taxpayer money that's intertwined in the economy. So would there be massive interruptions to these innovations?
Well, that's actually why, okay. What you're talking about is, remember, during the debt ceiling deal, I wouldn't say it was a deal with the Democrats, and Democrats went to war with us. It was sort of a capitulation at the White House. We were only allowed to negotiate on 11% of the spending.
Yep.
Because around 76% of the spending is entitlements, earned entitlements, unearned entitlements. Then you remove defense. Remember, we weren't really allowed to talk about defense. And when you get left is, here's 11%, and that's government. That's the State Department. That's the Supreme Court. That's the White House. That's the EPA. That's what people somehow they just don't have their head around. Your government is an insurance company with an army. Mm-hmm. That's really what we are. And so that this 11%, let's say, is about $700 billion. Mm-hmm. We just removed $100 billion a year out of that.
Which is pretty big considering the scale.
It's considering where the cuts are coming from. Because we already have people, Republicans, coming at us saying, you got to lift the caps. You're going to freeze defense spending. You're going to freeze spending on things I like. We're a dairy state. We want more spending on this. I mean, it's just enraging because I'll get these phone calls. You didn't hold out for enough cuts.
However, don't cut my stuff.
Oh, God, yes. It's almost like the next sentence. It's just like the guy who said he wanted more spending for VA, and I explained we did put an inflation adjustment, so VA actually did get this. It's not enough. So cut, but just cut is theoretical until it affects them.
Of course.
So what happens if when we just did that deal and the economist, but particularly like Bloomberg Intelligence, comes back and says just that $100 billion cut out of that 11% of discretionary will slow down the economy in 2024 by 0.5% of GDP.
Which is big when you said we're only going to grow at 1.8%.
Yeah,
so
you start to realize.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I believe my approach is it's moral and economically rational, because if people are getting healthier, they're back in the labor force.
Right.
They're more productive. And do you get a productivity curve, a labor force participation growth? These cuts over here, you got to cut spending. We spend too damn much. We're going to have to deal with its implication on slowing down parts of GDP growth because we just don't have the cash. It's stunning if you really lay it out. But once again, 100% of the next 30 years of borrowing, Medicare, 75% of it, 25% Social Security, if we choose to backfill it when the trust fund is gone in 9 years, and then the interest.
And if we had to backfill Social Security 25%, that would be money borrowed, right?
It's all borrowed.
Yeah, so
it's all borrowed.
The only way. Because
it's all
not
borrowed.
Enough tax receipts.
Yeah. And so last year's model, about February's model, said we would now be borrowing about $128 trillion over that 30 years. But now we're having to rethink our interest calculation because inflation is so much stickier. Some of the economists are coming back and saying, you may not get back to that 2% Fed goal for years.
Wow.
And if you do, that's what's making some of the numbers much muddier. So if I came to you right now and said, I need, within the 10-year window, I need to do something to restrain the growth of debt and increase productivity and economic growth, I cannot come up with a better way. And one, it's also just good for society and saying, screw it, we're going to throw everything we have at taking on type 2 diabetes and obesity and all the other cascade of ailments that come with that. And yes, there's going to be people really mad at us. We took on smoking, 40, 50 years ago? Mm-hmm. And how many people do you know smoke today?
Not many.
And, I think it's your right to smoke.
Absolutely. Personal freedom.
But I also think you should cover your own costs. I don't think the person standing next to you should have to cover your costs.
So let's talk about that, because I read the average family, or the average person, spends about $11,000 per year in America, almost $12,000 just on health care. So your proposal, how would that help me reduce my spending? Because one of the craziest things about health insurance is that I have to go outside my network to get preventative care. That's a bizarre whole thing. So my costs are spent in trying to prevent as much long-term illness as possible. So if these changes happen, what happens to healthcare costs overall?
Well, okay.
These innovations, these
the model basically
changes.
says let's back up. Elementary school level. What's insurance? It's collectivizing the risk.
Yes.
So everyone, some people have more risk, some people have less risk, but you collectivize it. And then when something horrible happens, there's this pool. What happens if the entire pool's risk profile goes down? Your costs should go down.
You would think.
And that's the way it works. And it's sort of like one of the real cost perversities of Obamacare, the ACA. It's all Obamacare really is it's 4 categories. 3 are age-based and 1 is smoking. So here's the payment tiers. If you're part of this group up here, so if you're older in Obamacare and you don't smoke, you are being subsidized by the youngest tier because their costs are much higher than their utilization. Mm-hmm. The radical Republican alternative, and that was meant to be sarcastic if anyone wasn't listening, was instead of 3 tiers and smoking, we were going to have 4 tiers, age tiers, 4 age tiers and smoking.
Why did you add that 4th tier?
Because it turns out if you add that other tier, you smooth out the curve, the distributional effect. So younger people over here had a substantial reduction in their costs for health insurance. With the theory is if we could lower their cost, a lot more of them would purchase.
Absolutely. Because that barrier to entry is
because right now they don't purchase.
Yeah.
And therefore you end up with dramatically more subsidization on the older tiers.
Yeah, I don't think I had health insurance through my 20s because I couldn't afford it.
But this is more in the ACA model. It was just an actuarial model. It was just said, okay, we need a hell of a lot more of the people that don't really use healthcare to buy it.
Yeah.
And today we made theirs because we do such a concentration only 3. We make them pay dramatically more to subsidize.
So instead, if they were going to pay $300 per month, might be affordable versus $600 a month, you get more $300, and that's better than not having.
It was sort of the goal of dramatically increase the participation, and that was always one of the failures. If someone is intellectually honest, go back to the original writings of the ACA. They had this utopian vision that all these young people were going to work and substantially subsidize older people, but they were all going to buy, and they didn't.
Right.
And they didn't. And then so that's why during the latter years of the Obama administration, they kept moving lots of money into subsidies. And now it's part of the entitlement model that just keeps growing and growing and consuming every dollar in its path.
So what barriers do you face as a congressman that has these conversations all the time?
Oh.
And the second part of that question is, why are you risking telling the truth when it doesn't seem anyone else actually is? Because you are inviting scrutiny because people don't like what you say.
No, I get the crap kicked out of me like constantly. Well, first off, at a personal level, I'm incredibly blessed. I mean, I represent a very well-educated district.
Happens to be my district.
Yeah,
just saying.
But it's also a very entrepreneurial district. It's not a Republican or Democrat district. It's I'm let's be honest, I'm much more conservative than the district's profile, but they tolerate me because at least and I've seen this in our polling, even when they don't like me personally, he's too conservative. I do get, but he's really good at math. Mm-hmm. He tells the truth. and bless them. I appreciate that we've convinced, that has come through. We don't have a choice. The clown show sort of has to come to an end. But when I use terms like that, I mean sort of the whole debate hides from the truth. The number of people who say, I can't get up in front of an audience of my seniors and tell them the truth that their benefits are the primary driver of healthcare costs.
I take it personally.
Of the debt and deficit. Now, they earned it. It's
Absolutely.
part of the societal deal. We made it. Society made a deal. Mm-hmm. And when
you're not advocating to go against that.
No. Actually, I'm trying to save it.
Exactly.
I'm one of the few idiots who's actually trying to come up with the math to save Social Security and save Medicare. The others pretend they're with you, but every day they don't do something. They're knifing your retirement. By not doing something is the greatest cruelty.
I agree.
So you go through this sort of world of, if we can actually get some of these costs under control by doing it in a fashion of becoming, stop financing our own destruction, which is functionally what we do in this country, you can make the math work. You're not paying off the debt, but you are stabilizing.
Last time we talked, You want to have like a 95 to 97% stabilization compared to the economy where the debt is.
Yeah. The model we always work with is trying to stay within that 95, 97% of debt to GDP because that's fairly sustainable. But if I come being told right now that long-term GDP growth is only going to be at 1.8, you got to understand the scale of cost changes you have to implement. And you have to do it very quickly. You have to do it immediately. And so here's your problem. What happens when healthcare is 20% of the economy? And you have lots and lots and lots and lots of people with great ideas. None of them really disrupt costs and prices much, but they make little incremental improvements, or they make you feel better, or this and that. And they're lining up in Washington, D.C. in your office trying to explain to you how if we'll just give them a little bit more money, they have a new, better, faster kidney dialysis. Or a little bit, if we'd give them a little bit more money, they could build some more diabetic centers in the community, which, if you take a step backwards, is actually a great cruelty between the Republicans and Democrats, where the Democrats want to make it easier for you to enjoy your suffering, handle your suffering.
It's not a good quality of life.
Where some of us who desperately want to cure it, cures. So even when you get down to some of these drug pricing schemes of we're going to actually have price negotiations on these drugs. Okay, fine. Wouldn't the more elegant way to disrupt the price saying we're going to make it so everyone and their cousin is now in the drug manufacturing business? It's the disruptive drugs that if they can demonstrate they crash the price, we should, just be giddy. So thought experiment, actually, it's not even a thought experiment, reality. There is a single shot cure now for hemophilia type A. One of the most expensive diseases anywhere. The gamma globulin, forgive me for mispronouncing that, but the red blood cells can cost $250,000. I've been shown one paper, someone was at $500,000 a year. So if I came to you and said, hey, this shot is $1 million, $2 million, what? 4 years later,
paying for itself.
It's paying for itself. There are some things like that where the price is outrageous and the economic long-term benefits are wonderful. And there's some things we've worked on of like a healthcare bond where you sell a bond and the way you pay it back is the future savings. And that way you get everyone cured as fast as possible. So you hopefully get some productivity in society because they're no longer suffering. And it's moral. You got rid of the misery. And then you use the future savings to pay back the bond. So look, there's a lot of complication. You almost need my ginormous whiteboard to show all the different steps in here.
Well, it's like calculus.
Yeah, if you say so.
I took that in high school. That was the last math class
I'm very proud of you. But the left seems to believe the way to convince their voters that they're doing something about the cost of healthcare is rationing. They're going to make these drugs unavailable in a pricing mechanism. They're going to make this next generation of cures non-existent because the capital stack that finances those cures goes away. So if we have time, just sort of explain. Previous couple of years, Democrats have had a bill that the core mechanism of their pricing was something called reference pricing. In Europe, they use a formula. It's called quality adjusted life years. So here's a drug, but it costs $15,000 in Great Britain. And it gives you one additional quality life year. It is not purchased for you because they have a cap that's, I think, 13,500. Different countries have different. And if the price is above that, they just don't purchase it. And that's how they save money on their drugs. So the curatives.
It's an end around.
No, it's not it's a sledgehammer.
Okay, better way to put it.
And so the brain trust in Washington says, well, we should adopt what the Europeans do. We'll take 3 other countries and whatever their reference price is for one quality adjusted year, that's what we're willing to pay. And if the drug with its research and all the things that came together costs more than that, then we just don't buy it. And sure, I could crash the price of our pharmaceuticals if you just make it so we just don't buy the newest cures.
But are they necessary to crash the price of healthcare, the new cures?
They are. Mm-hmm. And there you get the catch-22. So I don't get to cure diabetes at the end of the decade if I have a reference pricing mechanism that so...
Because no one will want to invest in a cure for diabetes.
So maybe the much more elegant method is how do you get a much more dynamic, much faster, much more disruptive cures environment. So things such as using the new AI and the incredible data models as ways to start to do your first part of your phase 1 trials. Some of the new AI that's actually looking at small molecules, that's coming up with new pharmaceutical combinations that they don't need animal trials anymore, which is just moral because some of the animal trials are just horrific, and it'd be nice to end that in society. So do you incentivize a system where faster, better, faster, better, faster, better, cheaper? And a couple great ironies. In the United States, generic drugs, more expensive or less expensive than the rest of the world?
I would say more.
16% less expensive than the rest of the world.
No kidding.
Yep. Because now there's certain generics that are more expensive because they're in shortage. But there's new ways to manufacture. If someone is listening to this and you're out of your mind, go look up high speed 3D printing of pharmaceuticals. There's this crazy utopian model of instead of one or two manufacturers making these drugs that are now off patent. I mean, Humira, the most expensive drug in America, is now off patent. We need more people to make it. Now, that one's a bio and biosimilars that are coming. Really, it's much more complicated to make. But even with small molecule, it's functionally, here's the cartridges in a type of high-speed 3D printer. You don't need a $100 million clean facility. You can have something a fraction of that price and be turning out pharmaceuticals. So what happens if the PBMs or the pharmacy or the doctor's office or the hospital network get together and say, we're going to create our own competition. We're going to compete we're going to build a co-op over here and make, the 8 most common generic versions of insulin, which is already happening. And we're going to pump those into the market, and that's how we're going to crash the price. You have two very different visions. You have sort of the Democrats, the left sort of scarcity price control model.
Which is kind of Europe, Canada with their national health system, isn't it? Somewhat
scarce. And a reason if you have resources in Canada, you come to the United States.
Yeah. Otherwise, you got to wait a year to get an appointment.
Or over here, you do let's do the technology as we understand it. We needs to be safe, but you realize much of our FDA model, those things are 40 years, 50 years out of date.
Right. And how much technology has changed in half a century is tremendous.
Yes. So, and this is a much more disruptive model. And now you can go to crazy town. What happens if you have a prescription, you're going to be on calcium blockers, inhibitors because you have hypertension for the rest of your life? Okay, just buy it straight from the manufacturer. Do you just have, buy it straight from the manufacturer, have it dropped off at the house.
Now, how does that impact doctors and why do they fight against this, or hospitals? Because are they looking at lower costs and going, David,
but here's also part of the great irony. So every day I get a memo from some medical group talking to me about the shortage. We don't have enough primary care physicians. We don't have enough of this. And I go and speak at their conferences and say, you guys are amazing. I could have made it through medical school. You're freaky smart. You're this and that. You're also, half of you are about to retire. We're never going to have enough doctors to replace you. When you look at our demographic swing, we are going to need, we have 67 million baby boomers moving into retirement. Mm-hmm. We're not going to have enough doctors unless I supplement you. And for some of your activities, just replace it with technology. And they all look at you appalled, and then at the end of the meeting, they all come up and say, yes, we're trying to figure out how to do that ourselves. I'm trying to invest in that. And remember, here in the Phoenix area, there was an experiment. Before COVID, it was fascinating. Then COVID sort of blew everything up. And a couple of the Safeway grocery stores here in town, there was an autonomous healthcare center. You walked in, you signed up yourself, then you watched an avatar and it said, pick up this thing, put it in your ear, put this one, shine it in your nose, shine this one down your throat. It was an autonomous, and it collected all the data off your body. And then at the end, the algorithm did the data, and then a doctor came up and explained to you what the data was.
Wow.
And if you could have done it without the doctor, you would have saved a fortune.
I bet.
Now what happens when that type of collection of data now you can have in your home, in your home medicine cabinet?
Well, and you think
that's the vision.
Doctors can get back to doctoring rather than kind of segmenting through.
Actually, what you're seeing is a migration towards specialties.
Yeah.
You're not going to take your own appendix out. But knowing there's something wrong, did it really require that medical professional, or could it come right off the data from your body?
Yeah, so you do your autonomous doctor. Hey, you have to go to the hospital because you have appendicitis.
Yeah,
okay, I'll drive myself there.
Well, yeah, not exactly, but okay. But yeah, if we're going to be silly, but you start to think about, so the cures on this end, some of the new stem cells, the new genetic, the taking on diabetes and obesity, and then embracing disruptive technology and doing it fast. My greatest fear is this is out there, but because of the money, the lobbying, the tort system, the fear, it will come at us very, very slowly. Just like telehealth was coming at us very, very slowly until the pandemic, and then it leaped. I don't know what's going to create that punctuation, where actually there used to be this term called punctuated equilibrium, where you're going along, and boom, you leap up to the next level, other than a debt crisis. And the problem is doing something like this in the middle of a debt crisis be substantially impossible. So if you're ever talking to a politician and they're telling you, we need to balance the budget, okay, then sit back and say, okay, how? And if they don't talk about a dramatic change in the price of healthcare, they're lying to you. It's just that simple.
What I think is fascinating, too, is you're not talking about cutting people's benefits, cutting people's healthcare. You're talking about an enhancement, which will then enhance people's quality of life.
Yep.
Which is the moral part of all of this.
Yep. And it grows the economy. It's the only path. Please, I have years of sleepless nights just worrying about these.
So why do you? Why are you the guy in Washington that's worried about it? Because someone has to be? Or because you like math that much?
No. I think a lot of the members of Congress are worried about it. It's just we're not acculturated to think of what is the actual drivers of the debt, and then how do you disrupt those drivers? So, if you and I run into someone on the street and they say, I'm concerned about the debt, let's cut things. Okay. And then you explain that almost all government spending is benefits. Yep. It's Social Security, it's Medicare, it's Medicaid. They look at you like, I knew that, but I didn't process it. At some point, you got to process it and then figure out how you disrupt it.
How do you add more of a pro-growth policy on top of trying to change, for overall economy, changing the price of healthcare?
Well, and you and I did a little bit of this on one of the previous podcasts. It's sort of the unified theory. And that is, I must crash the price of healthcare. I must get a talent-based immigration system. I have to, when I say we as a society, we have to adopt technology to functionally replace much of what is the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy has been politicized and weaponized. And I can actually give you, I'll do this real quick. So you're the EPA. And your job is, just like the county health department, you want good quality air. We want clean air.
Sure.
Fine. So you're going to, because you are this sort of guy, you're going to put together a motorcycle paint shop.
Sounds like something I'd do.
Yeah, it actually sort of does. Because you got tired of painting bikes in your backyard. And so you have to go get an air quality permit. You have to get your scrubbers, your booth certified, and all these other things. How about if I said, go get your permit, but instead of every 6 months or so, having to have an inspector come check your scrubbers and you have your accurate filters, if people in the community just had the little attachment on their smartphone that's doing air quality samples around the county, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, volatile organics and PM10s, all these other things, if you screw up, they catch you. They also catch the clowns that are painting cars in their backyard, without a booth or without, at least a plastic whatever. And it turns out you could replace the bureaucracy by crowdsourcing the data. It enrages the engineers that make their money coming, giving you the stamp for your booth and for your filters. But simple question, do file cabinets full of paper at the county air quality regulator make the air cleaner? Or is it just documentation for the trial lawyers when they want to sue you? You live in a world where you're walking around with a supercomputer in your pocket. So if you're Flint, Michigan, there's this little ring thing, it's like $29. You put water samples in it. All you needed was 50 people to have that, and they could have been testing the water samples and known instantly that there was a problem in the water. Or the air quality. There's versions that you can clip on your lapel, and it by Bluetooth talks. So put it on the side of the brown truck when the UPS comes by, or the Lyft or the Uber or FedEx or whoever you want, and you could have living data from your community. It's if you want to move traffic faster, and cleaner. Yes, it's technology. It's not necessarily more lanes. It's crowdsourced technology.
It's AI flow, right?
Well, but think of the things that go into that. Oh, we know the school is out this day. We know a hospital has just sent an emergency vehicle at this moment. It can't be static. The synchronized lights people got giddy about, that's static. It has to be living data. It's to be constant crowdsourced data. How many of us drive with Waze? So as we're thinking about how you grow the economy, that adoption of technology and the elegance of it, it blows up the bureaucracy that's trying to run our lives. And I can barely find ways to finance their pensions.
So there's, again, this isn't a loss in the sense that it's necessary. So I get this.
It makes society more productive.
Yes, I get this. Exactly. Which, again, gets back to that growth, which helps everything.
And then there's one of the biggest ones and most controversial ones is we need a dramatic change in the tax system. The way the United States does its tax system today benefits foreign countries. And this one is much more controversial, a little harder to explain. $100,000 vehicle. Let's just call it a Tesla because this works as an example. Made in the United States, and we ship it to Germany or China. It gets to those countries and hits their shore, and because those countries use a value-added tax, they use a VAT tax. This $100,000 car hits their shore, and they slap, 18.5%, 19.5%, whatever their vehicle VAT tax is, on that vehicle. And now your $100,000 car is $119,500. But that same vehicle is made in Germany or China, and let's say it's $100,000 in their country. When they ship it out, they refund the value-added tax to them. So it just came down $18,500, $19,500, and it hits our shores cheaper than we could even make it in ourselves. It's a tax arbitrage. And then we put, a 2% or whatever the particular tariff is or tax is. But the rest of the world, because they use an income tax, but then a value-added tax, which they refund if you export, but they put back on if you import. We don't do that. So the rest of the world screws us. It's a technical tax term. And that is something we're going to have to fix. Because it would make manufactured items in the United States competitive with anything made foreign. And it would also make the things we export competitive with everything made around the world.
So how will that work? So if I'm Germany, I sell a $100,000 car, I export it. who sends me the value-added tax as a refund, or Germany just
No,
they
just right there, right at the shore, right. It's in the customs. Okay, here's your check. And simple example for have you ever traveled internationally?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, did you ever buy something fancy for someone you were with? Don't answer because you'll get yourself in trouble. Yeah. And you're going through the airport and you notice there's this VAT refund desk for if you bought that piece of jewelry for who you're with and you're about to leave Italy, or you're at Heathrow Airport and outside London, and you can come up with your receipt and they give you back the VAT tax because you're exporting the item. You're taking that item back to the United States with you.
Because the VAT is essentially paying for that country's
but it's for internal.
Yeah,
but it's internal.
Right.
And they want things exported. So they give it back to you. That's the same thing. So we don't use that type of tax system here. So when I'm doing my unified theory of one of the peers in that theory is you got to fix this tax system because we're not competitive in the rest of the world.
I love tax conversations. Maybe we can delve into that. Plus, you were instrumental in the 2017 tax reform.
Yeah, I did much of the international taxes in the 2000s. I'm number 4 in Ways and Means. So I spent a lot of time in taxes, and I've been working very hard to not sound like a complete geeky idiot. So this is my super simple version. But there's ways to get that dynamic economic growth, and even with the headwind that is our demographics. Remember, we're down to, I think last year it looks like it's even lower than we expected, 1.67 fertility rate. You need 2.1 just for population stability. The best math right now says in 18 years, the United States has more deaths than births.
Across the whole country.
Across the whole country. Half the states today already have more deaths than births. We're not a dying society, but we're right on the edge of it. And so you take those sorts of demographic headwinds, and then the realization our debt is primarily driven by our healthcare costs, and the fact that we really, really need economic growth, but we don't have the population dynamics to do it. So if you're someone that's terrified of AI, get over it.
It's here. It's staying. It's getting better.
If you're terrified of a robot flipping your hamburger at your favorite fast food joint, get over it. We don't have the people. We really don't. And we're going to have to embrace those types of disruptive technologies just to get the economic growth to stabilize.
What can we do? I was asking this, Congressman David Schweikert, to help as we the people. We mentioned a couple of weeks back, be specific when calling your congressperson. Yeah. How do we get specific about innovation in healthcare technology?
Make it, don't live in a place of fear. I knew there were people who hated the idea of not doing their Friday night ritual of going to Blockbuster Video and standing in line and finding out the little silver disc they really wanted wasn't there. Mm-hmm. But we all got over it and figured out how to go home and have Netflix and then whatever streaming service you want and hitting the button. And
it's way less wasted time in a line. It's
fantastic. And it's actually ultimately cheaper.
Yes, exactly.
Don't be fearful. Be hopeful, but demand that those people who are sort of pursuing elected life are in it become much more intellectually robust of the same old rhetoric of, Republicans, we say waste and fraud and foreign aid, and Democrats say tax people over $400,000. Remember, only 2% of the population makes over $400. We can take every dime they have, and it helps, but it doesn't get you anywhere near what's required to even balance a single year. So, and then maybe demand that people running for office actually own a calculator and know how to work it.
That would be help. I always like to think that how you problem solve should be a requirement, at least a discussion when you run for office. And what problems are you going to solve?
Well,
you've mentioned several.
I still go, biggest problem once again is the public is so busy.
Mm-hmm.
and we have so much noise. And we get home at night, and it's just so much easier to tune out and just turn on Netflix.
Yep.
And, we don't come home. It's not 30, 40 years ago where we read 3 newspapers and, and listen to Paul Harvey. That was from my radio guys.
Yes.
And so much of the information that comes to us on these emails and text messages and blogs isn't really information. They're just trying to get money from us. It's clickbait. Policy isn't clickbait.
No.
It's actually turns out for every complex problem, there's a simple solution. That's absolutely wrong. Complex problems require thinking.
Final question. Are you optimistic something major can get done to crash the price of healthcare? He's pathologically optimistic usually.
Yeah. Also 6 years old with an 11-month-old.
Yes.
So, and my wife's my age too. So we just adopted another little kid. Wonderful, wonderful experience.
He is cute.
Oh, he's adorable. I'm actually growing much less optimistic on this. Even the most incremental conversations I have, or hearings I hold, I chair oversight in Ways and Means, so I have, the oversight of all this. And we've held just, even a small hearing recently on nonprofit hospitals and where they're meeting their community tax requirements. And the hate you get from that, just asking questions. There's just so much money out there and an army out there which wants to keep their cash, keep the money, keep their salaries. And my fear is the ecosystem has gotten so big that they all know this, the wheels are going to come off. But it's almost, I'm going to take every dime I have till, we hit the guardrails and it crashes and burns. And it doesn't need to be that way. And there's just not enough elected officials with me who are willing to take the pounding of the hate ads. I mean, we had a group come in and spend, I guess, several $100,000 beating the crap out of me a few years ago for my work on telehealth. He's trying to interrupt your doctor-patient relationship. No one understood what the hell they were talking about, but they were trying to stop my telehealth bill. And until the public gets really, really sharp, those dollars manipulate, and politicians reflect the inbound information they get from their voters. So, look, I'm going to keep pushing till, I find myself having walked off the plank because it's the right and moral thing to do.
Agree. And,
it's the most interesting job I've ever done. I both love it and despise this job. And I spend a lot of time just angry. There is a way we can make the math work, but we don't move very soon, very quickly, very boldly, we're screwed.
So another option for you, a necessary as you're listening, forward this on to somebody. People that care. People that love this country like we do. Get this information in front of them, because if we spread this word, that's how we the people wake up, and that's how we the people finally say, guys, we don't want to screw our kids over, because that's exactly what we're doing.
It's more than the kids. This will screw over your own retirement.
What else you need to be saying right there? Congressman David Schweikert,
thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here and all this time, and we got more to talk about, so we'll keep it happening.
All right, you're wonderful.
This is Congressman David Schweikert's third appearance on Equal Matters. In the first episode of the podcast, you'll learn more about the demographic challenges the United States faces and how it relates to what we discussed today. In the fourth episode of Equal Matters, the congressman came back to discuss why American politics is broken right now, mostly because of money. So go back and catch those episodes if you haven't had a chance to listen yet. Once again, my name is Rob Hunter. I've been a radio broadcaster for over 25 years. I created a communications course called Master Your Message, where I'll show you how to use broadcasting techniques and skills to improve your performance at work. Improve your performance, which will help you create your opportunities. How to get started? Go to paintedporchstrategies.com/communication. paintedporchstrategies.com/communication. Or if you want to accelerate your performance, let's chat about coaching. I'll coach you as you implement these broadcast techniques to improve your performance even faster. paintedporchstrategies.com/Rob. Go there, and under one-on-one coaching, you can book a 20-minute consult call for free on my calendar. paintedporchstrategies.com/Rob, or you can email me, rob@equalmatters.com. rob@equalmatters.com. Thanks so much for being here. If you like what we're doing here at Equal Matters, please share this episode with your friends. Rate and review it as well, because that's how we grow. We've got some big plans for Equal Matters, getting you more insight, broader perspectives, firsthand experiences, and we plan to take Equal Matters more on the road as well. Thanks for being here. Once again, my name is Rob Hunter. Good night.